The Russian Federation is the largest and most powerful out of all the successor states of the Soviet Union. Because of this status, it inherited most of the very large fleet of armored vehicles which the Soviet Army had during the Cold War in case of potential war against NATO and its allies. Several tens of thousands of vehicles, many of them obsolete, ended up in Russian hands, and upgrades have been applied to many to try and keep them relevant in modern warfare. A recent example of these upgraded Cold War vehicles is the BMP-1AM. Hi, I'm Tony. I'm a new narrator for the Tank Encyclopedia YouTube channel. Today, we will be going through the development history, design characteristic, and operational status of the BMP-1AM. The BMP-1 infantry fighting vehicle is a very common vehicle in this large fleet and surplus of ex-Soviet armor. Generally considered to be the first modern infantry fighting vehicle, the BMP-1 was designed by Chelyabinsk tractor plant in the early 1960s, named Object 764, and later evolving into the Object 765, adopted by the Red Army in 1965. Mass production began under the name of BMP-1 in 1966. The BMP-1 was a welded, amphibious armored fighting vehicle mounting a central one-man turret armed with a 2A-28 Grom 73mm low-pressure smoothbore gun and fed by an autoloader mechanism. The vehicle also featured a coaxial PKT 7.62mm machine gun and a 9M14 Malyutka missile mounted on the top of the Grom's barrel. To the rear, a troop compartment allowed the vehicles to transport 8 passengers. When first pushed into service in the late 1960s, the BMP-1 was revolutionary as the world's first infantry fighting vehicle. A vehicle which could transport a section of infantry through a variety of terrain, notably thanks to its amphibious capacities, and support them against fortifications, thanks to the Grom, enemy infantry, thanks to the Grom and PKT, and even armor, thanks to the Grom against light armored vehicles and the 9M14 Malyutka against tougher opponents. This was a considerable evolution in comparison to armored personnel carriers, APCs, which typically mounted little more than a heavy machine gun. In the Soviet Union, production of the BMP-1 lasted until 1982, with more than 20,000 vehicles produced. Almost equally large quantities were manufactured in Czechoslovakia as the BVP-1, while India produced a number under license, and a number of countries would produce more or less identical copies, Type 86 in China, Borah in Iran, and Khatim in Sudan, operated in massive numbers by the Soviet Army and widely exported. The BMP-1 became perhaps the most ubiquitous infantry fighting vehicle in the world, despite a more modern type, the BMP-2, entering service in the early 1980s. With the fall of the Soviet Union in 1991, large numbers of BMP-1s ended in the hands of the new Russian Federation, but the large production run of the BMP-2, as well as the newly produced and vastly more modern BMP-3, meant that the BMP-1 has progressively declined in the active Russian arsenal. By around 2018, most estimates place the number of active BMP-1s at around 300 to 500 vehicles in a few motorized rifleman units. However, very large numbers of the type were sitting in reserve, around 7,000 according to some estimates. While the point of modernizing the BMP-1 in Russia may still appear somewhat inexistent due to the large numbers of BMP-2s already in service and undergoing modernization process, as well as the presence of the BMP-3 and the development of the Kurganets 25, the possibility of export is likely a motivating factor in the development of a modernization of the BMP-1. More than 40 countries still operate the vehicles, including some such as India, Kazakhstan, or Egypt, who remain loyal customers to the Russian military-industrial complex and operates large fleets of the vehicle. During its service and production, the BMP-1 went through a number of upgrades and new production standards. For example, in the 1970s, the BMP-1P appeared, which notably replaced the old Malyutka ATGM by a Konkurs. as well as adding a number of changes, taking lessons from experience in the Vietnam War. After the fall of the Soviet Union, a number of more extensive upgrades were considered. The 73mm Grom was now vastly considered to be an outdated weapon, lacking in anti-tank firepower against tanks and even other infantry fighting vehicles, which typically had heavier armor and sometimes explosive reactive armor in comparison to their Cold War counterparts. Several different upgrades were proposed by a variety of manufacturers during the 1990s and 2000s. For example, one designed by Tula Instrument Design Bureau used the new TKB-799 Cleaver turret, which mounted 4 Cornet ATGMs as well as 30mm 2A72 autocannon. Another project consisted in mounting the turret of the airborne BMP-2 IFV, armed with a 30mm autocannon and a Concourse missile. The BMP-1AM is a later project. It was developed by a bureau of the large military conglomerate that is Ural Vagon Zavod, or simply UVZ. The first traces of a modernized BMP-1 by UVZ appeared in a report from April 2018. The vehicle would be presented in Russia's annual military-industrial show-off, the International Military and Technical Forum Army, in its 2018 edition, taking place in August. The upgraded vehicle, which rolled out in August 2018, was far from being entirely unknown and new. Instead, it would be much better described as mostly unchanged BMP-1 hull fitted with an already existing turret in order to enhance its firepower. The core change that differentiates the BMP-1AM from a regular BMP-1 is a replacement of the BMP-1's one-man turret fitted with an autoloader and armed with a 73mm Grom by the weapon station featured in the Russian BTR-82A armored personnel carrier, itself an improved version of the BTR-80A's weapon stations. The main armament of this new turret is a 30mm 2A72 autocannon. It fires 30 by 165mm cartridges. This weapon has a rate of fire of 350 to 400 RPM. The gun is belt-fed and overall remarkably light, weighing only 84 kilograms, and has a barrel length of 2,416mm. This barrel takes a significant part of the weapon's weight at 36 kg and is typically thicker and more durable than most barrels for 30mm autocannons. A number of 30 by 165mm shells are available for the 2A72 for use against light fortifications, infantry, soft-skinned vehicles, and other unarmored targets. The 2A72 can fire the 3 UOF-8 high-explosive incendiary shells in high-explosive belts. It is complemented by the 3 UOR-6. This shell forsakes most of the explosive charge to mount a very large tracer, fired at the same muzzle velocity of 980 meters per second. It is used for fire correction purposes, though over large distances, the trajectory of the two shells may begin to differ. With a fuse lasting 9 to 14 seconds, the explosive shells will generally detonate after about 4 kilometers if they have not met a target, so autocannons are typically used effectively at much longer ranges. The rate of tracer to high explosive rounds in a 30mm belt is most commonly 1 to 4. For armor-piercing duties, two 30mm shells exist. The older 3 UBR-6 is a fairly classic armor-piercing shell with a core of hardened structural steel. Its penetration values against rolled homogeneous armor RHA at an angle of 60 degrees are 29mm at 700 meters. 18mm at 1000 meters, and 14mm at 1500 meters. These are fairly mediocre performances, able to defeat little more than light armored vehicles in the vast majority of cases. A more modern armor-piercing shell exists in the form of the 3UBR-8, an armored piercing discarding sabot APDS shell with a tracer. It features a lighter tungsten alloy piercing core. This shell seems to penetrate against similar RHA armor and at the same angle at 60 degrees, 35mm at 1000 meters and 25mm at 1500 meters. It offers much more promising performances than the older 3UBR-6 against modern infantry fighting vehicles. This 30mm gun is mounted centrally on top of the turret, on a mount which may depress by -5 degrees and elevate all the way up to 70 degrees. This high vertical targeting means the autocannon can typically be used in limited fashion against air targets, notably helicopters. The sight used by the gunner is a TKN-4GA sight, which can operate both in day and night conditions and is fully stabilized. As a coaxial machine gun with elevation tied to the main gun, the turret mounts the classic PKT machine gun, which has a rate of 700 to 800 RPM, firing the 7.62 by 54mm Russian cartridge on both sides of the 30mm autocannon. The vehicle features three 81mm smoke dischargers. As on the PTR-82A, the BMP-1AM's turret is fully stabilized. It is sometimes mentioned that the vehicle is also armed with a 9K115 Matisse 2 ATGM, but this does not appear to be the case. This weapon is not mounted on the PTR-82A and has never been spotted on the BMP-1AM. As on the original BMP-1, the BMP-1AM's turret is operated by a single crew member. Unlike in the original design, however, this time the turret is operated from inside the hull. This does not change the internal arrangement of the vehicle in a significant way though, due to the original turret already featuring a turret basket and an autoloader reaching into the hull. The hull of the BMP-1AM is very similar to the one present on the classic BMP-1, keeping the form of a welded steel box with a boat-like shape towards the front to improve buoyancy, a centrally mounted turret, a crew compartment for 8 passengers as the rear with 4 firing ports on each side and one on the rear left door, 4 hatches on top and 2 rear doors opening outwards and also containing fuel tanks. The main change in comparison to the original BMP-1 comes in the form of the engine, and it is not a particularly radical transformation. The original UTT-20 engine of the BMP-1 has been replaced by its improved version already present in the BMP-2, the UTT-20S1. Both engines are identical performance-wise, featuring 6 cylinders and 4 strokes, being water-cooled and with airless injection diesel engines producing 300 horsepower at 2600 RPM. The main modifications between the two are focused on making the operation and maintenance of the engine easier for the crew, including fuel drains from injectors, cover for the access hatches to the nozzle, and a system allowing for a cold start of the engine without preparations at temperatures of -20 degrees and higher. The BMP-1AM also features a new radio. The old R123M has been replaced by a R128-25U-2 with a communication range of up to 40 kilometers. Outside of this new engine and radio, the vehicles being modernized saw their transmissions and chassis revised and repaired to an optimal state. Small wings have been added on the front of the side mudguards in order to mildly improve amphibious performances. Besides those changes, the BMP-1AM seemingly remains identical to the original BMP-1, keeping the same configuration of 3 crewmen, commander, driver, and gunner, and 8 passengers. Overall, the BMP-1AM retains a lot of the old shell and capacities of the BMP-1, with upgrades in a few critical fields. The new turret and equipment resulted in the vehicle's weight rising to 14.3 tons from 13.2. When it was first presented in August 2018, the BMP-1AM was given the name Basurmanin. This name roughly translates to pagan. This had, at the time, been thought as a detail that pointed towards a theory that the BMP-1AM upgrade had been designed for export, which seemed a likely conjecture, seeing as the BMP-1 was rapidly fading from service in Russian service in the BMP-2, BMP-3, and in the future, the Kurganets 25. However, in 2019, confirmation came that the BMP-1AM was actually entering service in the Russian army. In early June 2019, Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu affirmed that the Russian army would receive 400 modernized combat vehicles in 2019. This total included T-72B3Ms, T-80 and T-90Ms, but also the BMP-1AM Basurmanin, serving as confirmation that the type was entering Russian service. The BMP-1AM also made an appearance in the Army 2019 exhibition, which served to confirm that it was a somewhat durable type that may continue to be offered in the future.
That's all for this video. Make sure to follow our website, we'll be releasing new articles on the regular. You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram or Reddit, and if you use Discord there's a link to our community server in the description. Also, likes, comments and subscriptions on YouTube are greatly appreciated. If you would like to help us continue to develop and expand, also consider donating on Patreon or PayPal. All of the funds will be used to help us enhance and design new articles and features for you. Until next time, keep us in your sights.